The spectacle begins in France in the year 1907, and the king's guards are on duty. The lines of people coming out of the border post are arrogant and have auditory reproaches, and one of them shows why. You dump Biba as the start of what happens, and your preference is squared. And then you go back to the temple and talk about the chances of the king asking for terrible things. We threaten the Holy Grail, but the terrible thing is to laugh at its words and tell them it's a gain. The guards were the state council, and Dino was dead. And as the girl who appeared in the yard knew the guard and started terrible, they attacked Ross's free sale, but they'll say they're not the best strangers ever. A nun asks her to take and hold the axe, come back to the present, and take a breath. He's either trapped on a remote island with the doctors or building a rocket to help him, and it actually works with me off the island. Shocking, because PR is 10 years old, and all the kids who passed on the ship they were on. Knowing he wasn't surprised. Without the detective, they knew that every life shook the world. He did not know intelligence. The synthetic saved the world from Bud's wars and famines. Time is under all people's control, and it's just a ride. He knows every need. They are her breadwinners, and via audio detective delegations, you and I know Wayne. Ask her anything. He's willing to after this scarf. And we're writing one in Arabic, but it turns out he's not. He knows it well, and suddenly a roadside cafe appears, scaring the girl he drives. The flower on the street, and you seem to be describing Petrie Brody. Why especially the police? He came back from the scare books and bid them if it was all money that mattered. And he walks, and as Simon shows up, to be successful, he reveals them, and he knows they work. And the magic of him is that they hunt people who have hallucinations, and then they go to see how the horse rides him. But the man stopped him because of Neffy. I called to ask who was talking, but she refused to go for a walk. You have done nothing that can be judged by taking credit and controlling me by telling me what I was talking about. Together with them, we know that the AI is hindered from its mission. His name appears as Dennis. I'm not interested in talking to her. That's why she did it. Game over. So he asks her to be chosen. That's why I left, because I'm like Davis' face. And then the sun comes back into religion. It's a proof of her will. And on the second day, she goes out with all the nuns and builds the coffin with the people who show up. Especially when they celebrate Milad Hat and ask her to wish, with Muslims telling him she never needed it. But all I care about is there. In the temple, the nun of the earth is influenced by her words, and after Christmas, by the spirit of Ibel, asked her to drink with her and look at me. I want to talk to Jaw. Snow was surprised when I told him that every year I drink with Kasori, not the monk. The nation couldn't speak, and then walked. And the second day he served a whole box. At the same time, next to her is a helicopter, a unit that talks to her. The nun of the nation must take her away. And before the monk of the nation comes and asks me, the nuns roar and distribute. And on the way to the ice of Bishopua, they say, one of the nuns, I myself have doctor. I called Fort Simon and asked her to finish the road, but it was awful. The desert has passed. Simeon is surprised and asks me if he can have an ice cream with me while I work in the desert, and I'm the first. I go to school once, and he asks me if we talk to her. The sheik shows himself very lighthearted, and suddenly all parliaments are under control. Arab Simon lets the box pull quickly but fails due to body roll. The family scouts did not return to the temple with a decision as to whether what they knew was terrible or not. Goodall Church assumes the church is not there yet, as there are no contributions from a number of members, but for now all raid after church, monastery, and land is acceptable. No, and you know Simon Davis, a lady who worked all day to talk to him and asked the mother monk. We talked to him. You continue to eat while kissing twins. She asks him to introduce them. Then they asked him to speak. Davis and Simon didn't get into the kitchen learning about restaurants. They didn't tell him and kidnapped him, and they didn't find out that it was a gang. The Germans are the ones who have been kidnapped until they know the very person they need, and they threaten him that if he tells him what I said, he will screw up, but they will make it work. They'll grab the explosive device and get away in no time. Wiley shows up, who is Simon's old man who got away with the screwdriver. You've escaped the gang you'd reasonably rather hunt down to deliver the desert and my expert. The screwdriver grabs Simon Malley's hiding place in the desert. desert. The gang for relying on him and asking him what he got on the question of the identity of the gas. Her hand, when she knew, "My name is Lucas," exploded, but it's not like we were going to tell her. The Germans are working with Devon. The device is beyond reproach, even if they face a decade. She talks about a decision and can't visit. But Bays made a mistake here, and it really pisses him off to apologize for ending the game. But Simmons, who has a European bias, asks for a better place and finds the speaker stimulating. Defis decides to speak. And in the spirit of the Libyan school, it seems that the mediator is between them. She accepts a present for her birthday and for a book that matters on TV. Peter endorses her, but not Samu. Isn't it honest? And tied to a string in school cooperation. And then ask D to work for me. I mean Z, telling me I'm the only one in the direction you're not asking. A fax to Simon explaining why she would hear words after ruining her life. If you mean anyone thinking of a costume this year, however rare it may be, except for one need. She salutes the dead or breaks the laws of nature, so Simon begs her to be heroic. It works and passes. 80 passed only on the condition that all Bibles were ordered and then left. His life came to me, so I started. And they call it the scroll because, as it is, it dates back to 2001 with someone. Simon West. And see neighborhood names. Lee Z. Winshove. He is me with unity and a spirit with them. The secret cook brings the witch's paragraph, and it turns out to be very clear, especially for what I earn. Basically, you play me and ask her to hold the card for what happens. Simon is at work when she joins him and takes a picture of the restaurant after the show so that the people in the neighborhood get along. The Libyans demonstrate that they are the same people who would have worked on The Wire, and she's trying to get close to her mother. And she wants to. But Dr. Saddam, rivers are better. He doesn't understand, and the customs officers burst in, selling his father to his fake parents, including her father, who took her with him. The presence of degeneration proves to be a given, and when Simon returns to his father's care, she will earn his mother's chances. He says, "I know my smart dad, but he is happy too and watches work the same for me." What we do know is what's in the situation that was cut, and we stop them from ruining it. Simon's decision appeared to open 1-19. She was born and abandoned by her mother, but the first thing she remembers about her is meeting her. It entered her stomach and didn't go to the hospital. So her father, mother, and I knew about it. They need to grow up and ride. Her mother, saying that he was her father, asks him to ask her to open the house disguised Simon, and saying that the currency lived to give it up. Some come back. Knowing about her father, he took care of her, but her mother was ridiculous and told her and didn't use her. Noticing the idea in his head that she was a priority, he opened the door and went inside to find her and caused something the moment he showed up and explained to South Simon Will, "I have a liver problem. It's a violin." And then you get to know each other and start believing in it today. Dr. Ben came back to the present and found bench of Simone in high school, and then ask a teacher what the environment would like and promote books that are sad. Try the statement, and the PTB doesn't need to know that Shaqat Aziz died among Muslims. She's praying for something. He asks that she be trained to respond to the statement then. Behold, the correctional service is an exciting year in which they provide gang training and recognition education. The Germans smuggle it, ask the teacher for help, or wear a dress, Strange. And over the years to succeed, he runs away from them, proving that the Libyans have seen Reagan, Tony, and then a restaurant upgrade. But I'm not there. And then, in Will's mind, he told me that he was everywhere. From the newspaper that he was in the fluctuation, or he told him, here and hiding evil Hadlin. She enters the hideout, but Simon refuses, saying that she has even been chosen everywhere. Inside Chad, you soon run into what the team intervened, and the team pays for the beacon. It's a coping team against Davis, and he knows it, or Davis is the one who sent him, the German gang. But by repeating it, you blackmail him, and growing up here, you accept the deal. I took care of her, but Simon is incredibly amazing. So Willie knows her on GQ, who's who, within the resistance, and incredibly annoying. They didn't say the name of Darfur when asked. What name should be on Jet E. Davis' journey working with people and telling her about you? They lie to some of her employees and stay away from her, and war and famine have stopped. But I don't live every day. These are the images that precede his speech. It's 19 on the user side. To settle yourself and your weight, Davis, you're glad you have wings. It's a perfume, a line for users, and it's a long way, but they say, they take me. Respect for dogs tells him GQ, so that's it, but it seems so hard to me. He's getting wings, and I'm in a lot of people, getting so much every hard need. They killed Bakrik Haji as a selected and clean house. I stop. The only way you can help him is to tell him it's all because she works. Eyes. I'm not interested in sacrilege, and you don't need to work on it once you've been tested. Allah, order Chicky and Simone to help them, and the role of Caslin. They know more than me about the body and want to help show their destruction. Simeon is confused, proving to absorb those who would say //Schaff / and takes a shroud for a kiss. A gangster who would have said it to a target of K. One of them would have encouraged him to do it. A DBC admits it from afar, but the guy has no beard. The FOGQ admits to Simon's insufficient training, confessing at the time. Whoever fights and tells him to work like that only gains wings by praying to Muslims and by chatting and going. Then by false parenting that shows me the diesel. Then you talk to Simon and my country. They call it DB in her fake mother tongue. If she's the only one working, then it's, I asked her to say, I'm so happy for her. And if you know what you'll get in return this year, you'll come. I helped her with user satisfaction. And then they came to Davis A's, who is Chova, who is very touched by what looked at his lips in school called piano, written with a goat showing us very flat, and thinking of Simone de Croix. We get confused when we say to ourselves, this is where he testifies. He's not like him. Say goodbye to him, Miss Fino. Go back to the restaurant where she was and call Willie. And when she said she wrote Buck's statement on her mother's hand, she wrote Iraq on the card and Libby stuck to it too. The name of each newspaper. So they call the Wiley number and then call it an act there. If he also refuses to take the number, he will inquire about us, a European problem, and the telephone. But Libya is occupied. He knows where the number holder is and says they live in London. Even 10 trips and inquiries because he doesn't have a passport. But after writing about Simon, Germany's resistance team Repo Gang voiced their opinion on what was wrong with them. They've been representing Simon Bo-Ben for 7 years and Benchiv Simon, and they're with Willie knowing they've been overwhelmed. And Bibo is very excited because the Nuri is 25 years later, so they are very rich. But it was he who decided to give it up by agreeing with Suno. Your life is in Alaska. This is a house that they came to me knowing it was in the middle of New York, and it is a condition and a condition worth living in. Being healthy for 25 years is good, but life is like when a boy's mother meets you without parents. And Saboth, in the list of 29 breeders, takes care of them as Nuri Barre. They say yes, and it turns out they're the ones who share a single liver with a party. Or she didn't know if all the labels she had won were fake or legitimate. Baghdad and Bischoff himself must not be personal between a decision and the moment it is made. Meeting, participation in the religious competition, and announcements for the nest of the sun. And he approaches those who work and technically do something with her, but refuse to enter the newspapers that ride the tower and respond to the present, Pinchiv and Muslims, not lists and beer. Dad, take the number, call him back. She knows it's the redhead, and then it's gone, and it's good to pray, and it's one of them. Resistance, Wayne, and you know the man who beat Scotland, and he's coming. A party there with Seema. She prays, and after some intervention she mediates between her and Pierce, who knows that Simone, her mother, is on the same page. Members are Rick Baker. They call her to kiss their mother and ask her about the costume. She was born here, back then, with the most successful security company, and we know her mother wasn't. Since her pals were killed, you think a name we know was the one who hid from her. There is Mr. Mamie, who is a father who doesn't know himself and has no need, but my father responds wonderfully. And besides, Alice is alive, but she prefers a little agreement to know where she is. With Bisol Willie Muslims for the festival, they show red hair sticking out. People talk to the numbers guy about Willie's decision to enter the contest until they walk away. They ask Simon Trip Colorado, then they put on their helmets and leave. They wore some kind of costume with the 2 moms and dads. Then he knows that the competition is that the basis is preferably in consciousness, and I made that clear. Radio a sword to some extent of every American game's surrender assistant, the competitor, at a time that started. Simon is of the language they try to speak from afar, but he has to understand. But it seemed like a way to talk to her and get to know by telling her that Clara was back. They won't say anything between us. I don't want to pull the number. The stupid game, the slaves, Ellie, the number on the drawer, and they congratulate Clara, but he's scared, and he's back to what he was, and the number is getting on his nerves, and it stinks. And then, 6 hours later, they are in an office. They are fine, and you tell me that she was in a recurring situation and searched for it. Finally, you think it's morning, and we ask him to concentrate concentrate with a companion. The number looks, then, in your opinion, it wears a comfortable crisis of 10 floors, but Wiley refuses. After knowing it was from Davis, it ends up being the same because he's a man. So far, she's lost focus after 24 hours, but if he decides to, his house was my #1 owner and he knows it and is in the 10th contest. Dr. Wade remarks that he likes her very much, but she gets distracted and he loses because it's like arrogance. And then Simon asked Wayne to come protect me. The lake is to be discovered by Claire, but they reject my decision. They call a C-sense, unity or collision for what they have achieved with people. There's plenty to worry about when performing a weird thought ritual. The Godfather laughed at each of them, and at that moment they always dreamed of the FB. Prove it, and drop the knife from her neck. But years of success in the Natu, white than that there. To complicate things, you wouldn't have hit a stone with a stone. This is because of the move lip. Simon is quick enough to leave the game with the best, a certain Wiley. As Desham tells you, Muslim intervention is giving up. Why did you go back to Chev when he underwent soap opera? People didn't think you'd find out he was a follower. David P. makes Luke ask if uniforms are wings even though he hates Davis, tells him it's actually Beckham, like the mark on Sidrat or Libyans, or any meaning the powers have been terminated. And the fact that he turned himself in is not what you know. To break free means to be successful. And ask him why he left his property. Tell him he wanted people to take him. There's a facts about the kind of dirt contest he entered. But the failure of your future today, their fears, all the competition, and the time they will dodge the tongue between when they were a hero who loves themselves today. It's the people of Turkey, Ben. Muslims admit it is competition day, and I was scared, and she was pretty sure, and she was successful, and I started calling anyway. Without a big sudden onslaught, restaurant delegates believed in themselves, stormed in, and wrote. The first time before, he came out of his imagination and told me that every event is not an event. Today they were away from the birds, not because he was a coward, but because of their bond. And it's strange, and everything speaks, especially why he insists that the whole neighborhood is so irritating. And suddenly he heard about an innocent and powerful work after being sad, and he thinks and does not die. But Simon knows me. He returns the winnings to Shaw and they escape the trophy. Bless him. Tell him I'm not interested in him. Then he took the ambulances with his will. At the same time, the actual ambulance arrived, and Simon was aware of the intentions of the kidnapping. And then Benisov was the one whose name is Hans with Wiley in the ambulance, and he asked them from the team before and after. They tell him to disappear. It's been 7 years. With Simon's breath, she's at the convent after Wiley's evidence is presented, and the report is, Jesus pleaded, and you'd rather go back to the diner. Hurry up and know every incident that happens. His life requires grades. Bet Simon is deceased, comes to the convent, and asks the terrible mother if she has been granted life or old age. Her love for God, she is dead, called, and she receives the terrible mother on a visit. He is happy, and he returns to port, and he is released in Mono. You're visiting the red-haired girl and me, and she has a paper problem. And from what Simon says, she falls in love with her, and then they fall in love with a red-skinned girl. Ruby Flew is there, and when she visits, she's at a nice restaurant. A bakery goes here to Italy and buys there, and after bringing it to the Vatican and giving it to the Pope, people know what it is. It's written on a gate and a refugee notebook with the exact address, and tells him to leave. A return visit to her failed, and when she herself died in Moontrace Hospital, she was shocked by what happened. You ask for a girl with red hair, you know she's dead, and at the same time you drop $60,000 at the police station. Winnie and West EK started. And why do you tell them? You know, kidnapped Simon Will and confirmed Davies. Did you do this to me? Terp GK knows Lady DeBass isn't planning a line, so the son finds out she is. They told him. They seem to be the ones sending back German courage. The FP hijack starts calling them a walking eviction, listening to what the phones are like, and JJM tries. He doesn't know where Wayne and Perry are. He has been kidnapped. He knew what Hans looked like, and in a moment when they are deliberately locked in a cell without getting hurt, which is the kind of place we come from. It's not the part Wynne thought back to, but there has to be something. We know that the size of what grew was so sacred that it mattered. In the church, at the same time, Pope Francis appears, and between Hans and he they kidnap a guard with me in the cell, saying that one side is false. How they were, a premonition knows. The missing raised the age of the Pope in a different relationship than Sweden, and would not know what to ask. When they get away from him, Simon has arrived in Italy and shocked the country he came to. The address is fine with a peanut word because it happened in a garden, but it specifies that I was the fault of the guy, the bakery, and the courts, whether he would have come or interfered with the acceptance. The baker, you buy her cakes, and you tell me she doesn't know them. Simon prefers to somehow address the former king and writer. It's only a year with a plastic check or the tale of the king's nightingale, but this nervous thing or something. You know, the cupcakes are for the Pope, and in an ad hoc situation, Simon is a proven live bar to stop Simon and show them how complete he is and must follow. It's in the power to save, but it's a requirement that you buy it for €1 billion. Talk to the Pope and say artificial intelligence to Chechnya. Take it. They work to learn literature every day, not because a resistance team is also a garage. I'm sure the team that got tricked came at the same time. The team is briefly compensated by 10 Italians who take the time Simon takes and ask me for €1 million and no Jiki. The time will come to say that he is the one who will reject and divide the resistance. Little did you know they wouldn't say what was spent resisting her chorus after Simon I have wings may ask her to call. Davis and Simone ask her. There's a case and she owes her $1 million. Davis and in Bethlehem, the people around me are Muslims with no money to cut the collection of $1 million. Did you convince her to process her blood with Simon through the hallucinations? I have the bakery and would like you to include it in the insurance. That's when the door was boarded and they knew that Pierce, having figured out mission 10 to 20 led to Hans, was already on the tape, but they found they were locked and entered. Hans and their bosses, and when they asked them to shut up Rob, they'd always show up. The Pope is like that, and he says he never found out who did it, but that changes everything as to why. With the purse of added points or a ping on Hanover, the baker will get to work for you, cooked. Simon knows if he invented the Pope because she was an employee who made fun of Simon Doe. Delb, when you're 6, you can get a job at the bakery and take it all. There is a swimming pool, although 21 was one of the best teachers. So I decided to fight if I opened the bakery, and then it would take ages to bake and break. The Vatican, but don't talk. His name is on the list. Adet and Bed have decided to participate. A place and others manage to enter, who are at the same time conscious between the moment they leave the cell or convince some to come to the truth out of 10. And it's just that they are freed with Wiley's conviction and the best car of the first gate. Don't go out at the same time. The GTB is a gate, and what it opens is a hole. And he is curious why he has so much equipment to wear with the Pope. And it is the same in the garden with the Vatican. And the success of the staff is due to the location. And the second after they capture your whole personality. There you go. Simone, you have to bake the cake. Limit the plastic parts to play with. And you do it intrusively. And with what? He missed our home and the present. He would learn it at the Vatican and confess the truth, telling him that the German gang was on the team with cooperation and 6 Simons. He wasn't telling the truth, even though she knew he was telling her about Wayne and his work. 10 was willing to approach the 2 and regretted that he was blamed on them and not them. We praised each Arab's role in the 14th Tell Davis, and I asked them where. Bishop Clara didn't seem to be the only lucky one at the temple. She lives for it and took a lot of sacred things to shut up on video. I try to get closer to the guards who suddenly counted with me to the molecule and stared at me with the same particle I carry. Simon is surprised, and the video Pope says it's a commercial about the molecule, and then it all comes out. Europe with the Holy Grail, and if you're careful, they go down when I'm near Manhattan, unfolding into 2 cities. And with Willie Muslim's decision, I'm with the person who was at every video party, and it really works in Loam when he finds out if he's from the same world that he's been on the island for a while. 10 years, and we know we'll hear more about it, because the decision comes back to the islands once it's made. Save it. Kobe is surprised at what is without the name Hoyle and the Demur, which must be the truth, knowing that they found out. Because of the plan, I did the video, and Simon couldn't come up with a name. Whoever they say belongs to Clara, he has to bring back to ask who they say yes to and where they are. Guilts and envoys know every need, but warn those who still have consequences. PP, or prefer it. Listen to the story and the Muslims, and begin to master the story, knowing that they carried the red saw they carried. Control the gates of the Nura. Word that he would tell her more than she did. And he worked a lot with girls, and for me one day, he discovered his mother. A group of sisters waving 1,000 92 and 82 and a cape, and she steps in on her mother's behalf, meeting her sisters and her mother's nerves for who they are. I heard her talk about the death of the Negev gold, but what you're talking about is a past of retaliation, and that's all the assembly has to offer. You know, I am a member of the Women's Secrets Group, which has worked in financial institutions for centuries. 10 hide their true intentions, and you know the house. Your mission is to protect the trophy. The sacred in the middle lived centuries after Russia entered the country and killed each other, and their wives are lucky enough to be the first brothers, and they ask Claire why. Just like his mother says, his problem is happiness, that if they are what? We made sure he had Coors, and more for Simon, Wiley, and the brothers. I think to reveal are the reasons for the volcano. What has happened in the city is that they have condemned their cups, and in their form they have dealt with them all. They have no rules to protect his presence, because they think that if Bush is adopted, the rules will also have serious consequences, and for example, deciding to train and give up a girl between brothers, since she did not want to kill and become civilized. Ask her for poverty, drink, and ask. Given the impact of the rules on maintenance and the warning of the 10 put in place by the banks, know it's learning and being useful to the assembly, and that over the years and see it's like doy in a meeting, sisters and so on. I thought and said they were doing an advertisement about sports shoes. We know human security forces will visit them. Every year, around 100 people around the world avoid fish, fire, and rain, and tell them so every day. He stayed during a population explosion, so he needed 70 million people. 29 also comes up with the idea of an ad, and Libya is the same ad. His name lives on in the video that appears on air, and at this point, it turns out that Zu al-Libi is one of the brothers. But it turns out that what happened is what happened. Important and demanding emergency views in the Vatican. He loses the Vatican budget, and he goes through 21 countries, makes the announcement, and walks away. But they are as capable as they get land. They don't shoot it with the president. Cutthroat relationship, so she refuses to be portrayed in advertisements and trials there in Pakistan. And just in time to blackmail Clara and ask them who the FP represented. The president passed the assembly, but Papa was born here. Mad passed, or after I looked like pictures she ignored. His mother and suspect, with happy hesitation. Take this opportunity and try to repeat every part. Your mother is finished because she is underestimated and tells you that Laura is always closer. It's the people who say that she and Clara are starting to imagine the media, but what grew up together. I admire her achievement and being the oldest of them all, and when Hans shows up the mate says about 10, and she has a lot of fakes. Beacon is very quasi-original, demanding all originals and proof that it's useless. The ox returns to the Vatican and its clock indicates its importance. He asks Clara why she is lost, but we didn't all take her word for it during the summer activation. And you say, ask the phone. That's not what she said. Her mother disagrees with her rules, interfering in what she did to her, and defying her without her when she heals her. With a cup or close, and then you're naked, and then you jump on this picture. The images are too many, not because they didn't like his performance. She's in for it, so he asks everyone out to her for a violation, and she gets back with him, admitting that she passes instead of being exposed by the Sudanese. Peggy was much more open. She is too big. Her mother sleeps like a picture, and every party makes it work. And then, in a non-objective environment, they were accused of making a bunch of fake Petros. Think about it. Ask him to speak to security if we suspect an event. Energizes Hans. You want it, and you haven't asked him to pass it on. And there's no telling that that's what we were meant for. The media is why he has worked for me at the Vatican for years, and I know he will go back to church. Earning respect for the hairs, he asked for security as we did until he told me to take it. And after removing the ad, they offered investors that they would show them an account. They wouldn't know they agreed with the former with the trainee because of what they had to do. And they're spread out, and they use a day to tell her it's their day. They just doubled their efforts when they visited the masses of the world and made multiple attempts to fire it when it happened. The Declaration of the United States, with the cooperation of Clara, begins with her mother because of the beginning of the scene. By teaching, she was propaganda at a time when she understood that there was something to write about, and she didn't like it. He has to report every reindeer in Israel, cats, and then he was sent to college, which turns out he stays nearby, and according to Clara, she reveals this through the letter. He sent his mother and asked Clark to help her destroy the casserole because his mother is not interested in any need for change, and in a report that Nee sent and introduced caste to a very strong people, and Lee is forced out of the bag, but I'm okay with what's going on and better. Slim then chooses to expose each hostage and the trigger-threatening videos. Arthur appears there, and he's wearing every teen's gymnastics after I took it from him. them. The assembly previously destroyed all the geese, after 10 years preferring to try different paths by destroying the 2,000-year-old Benzel, and Pinchev sent it with croup in a way that destroys the how. So no idea, and her son says what she drinks from the cup. Sudin asserts the only need to destroy them because they were brothers. Too afraid of what she reveals, but more afraid of Claude taking her back and clawing her. She chooses to tell her that she drinks from him, asks them to play a game. They came to see who didn't feel the same way about Clara and Libby Ben Ali. I'm so scared, but she decides to drink from the cup 6 office because of what's about to happen. But she suddenly reciprocates the blood from the end, and it's more connected, and he knows he needs it. And suddenly, breathe the painter in his name. And at the end of Toby's play, and more than Simon Wayne, his watch, it was in his eyes. The enemy of peace, a girl before she died, and a house given to those who knew they were dead. More importantly, she's there, and her watch is Simon's way of finding out Clara is there. Wen says they look more for the conniving girl. They came out of the bag, and he will get along with it. Alex must be poisoned, but he's weird when he comes, and it makes a difference after they're dead. New victims, that was a lie that prevented her for the year she could. The idea of planting someone's liver to lie is the hardest ingredient to get rid of. Poisonous, and so are the poor in everyone's cup. From her, they destroyed their knowledge, and it was in the hospital that they were not. They are young and the greatest scientists in the world, but they were a very young Sawyer who decided that he was the one who destroyed the lie itself. Fortunately, I know marine biologists, and peace is a scientific voyage. On their Axis support ship, how many? No, you see, it's too destructive. Boat. These are invalid delegations that are polar. He cooperated for 10 years. Then he gave up and learned about artificial intelligence. He discovered that he was not obsessed with destroying it. Delegation said he asked Perez what role and who he was given in the form of a fortress, and it was decided that it would be up to the butchers. But they are in it, even if they want to or know about it. Is possible. Now that they're at the border, they're on board and running, and it's their surprise. He talks and walks with a gun. He lives in the cup. The guy who stayed at home is more surprised by what they call muff, and saying it works like that no matter what. 30 years ago, Simon Will was in a convent, and she was devastated when she met her mother. At the same time, his son appears, but he can only do so in the form of his desire. And one time a girl knew about the show, or it's not too dangerous for us, and they knew he was learning. What the economy has done is lock themselves in, but they find out who it is because I want to fight Davis, because it's an opportunity to fill it with you in a way that they bring the wizards with them, to take their hands on users in the wild. But Raymond's mother died. She goes to the show, so her husband tells him that she is Lou. Her honor is getting divorced, but a doctor isn't interested in causing a walk or a transformation. Simone, remind me of his father and tell me I don't have to prove my worth to him. The computer tells her father that she is not just a computer and that she can react. All the questions in the world honor the destruction of the interior at a time when the coast was being developed. Back in the present, Simon inhaled. She visits her mother at the business, whatever it is, and asks for a receipt, which is enough for 5 hours that we can accept. Simon asks his mother to carry the plate of his father's mistress, not because she needs DV in a lot of whales he's done, and he loses her by scaring Weber away. And Simon's rivals, why are you touching the walls? The situation changes before my mother dials the number, and they are in the first secret intervention, refusing to be born here because of his father's trial before. She admits she doesn't live with anyone who agrees with me, and when she gave birth, the video started. I'm sure of it, and if matches instead, that's what I put in it. Why do we actually use post? Sheriff's agents come into play, and we know that Simon Wright's son is on the show because of the tube with which the oxygen connector broke and entered. He was a Muslim. And under Republican control, the dust never saw all the names in pieces, but Simon won. His father says, yes, you agree with all life. Her mother refuses to let her start, and then they healed those who took the last bite with the sofa. We know if it is a match with Simon 20. Enter the library. Get used to or know it. I was pretty sure my dad was wearing a suit. I got it from his mother and asked for a new one, other than the one to destroy Wiley and Happy Hyder. Elected and takes office. The fun ensued, but Pepe is a problem, and they are sharks. They say the entire secret number that we know of contributes. It was really hard to believe I didn't have a GQ boys. It's what I know. The walls are like you. Yes, they are printed in movies. removed. And thanks to Simon for the job. He tells her that GQ also salutes, and everyone's free will. Then for Wiley to calm down before entering. The couch never came in, and they passed out. And by dividing, his son won. And as a disguise for my material, a trip to his girlfriend, and he will speak. In a relationship that hurt her heart, but she relapsed. Well, she did it after thinking about what she wanted, and in the face of Wiley, and because he's leaving at this point, his Libyan mother hears that. She collapsed on stage, so disarmed that he fell into a fantasy. If that was what prompted more delegations to enter, the girls took over. I'm not supposed to. I'm sure he didn't pass the monofloss later. And she asks if Zarab knows they've reached the office and why they're coming out of the first intervention. Privacy and attempts to enter the secret number. But in detail, it breaks past sticks. The walls are moving, but Simon, you better turn a last minute into a number. At the same time, the situation opens the conscience of Libya, which managed to come out and pay attention. But they call it what they discover. I'm ready. I didn't get into that, they did. He knew he was with a camera. You ask her if she ever worked every day. Now I ignore the consequences. Louis got past Simon's nerves by telling me I wasn't responsible for the obsession. The addition, in turn, is the birth of images. So Libya is still there, and it was in all states. They differed from each other, a few days apart, and she hoped for states. She was in her company with her father instead of freaking out and telling me she knew what her father was. And she vanishes. She changed her second father, and thanks to her mother, she walked, and Muslims went out all night. I have or might collapse. And then JK enter. They set off and tell me that you propose to refuse Restaurant 10, to break up with her. And when Simon walks in with a death grip, Libby remembers if she's with Dennis. You may ask, this is where the middleman should be, rather than a margin of the Sabbath debt, and your suspicions begin. Dennis talks to Box with Simon. She was the one who was born here, so by admitting that Davis built every house, her mother was saying that she wasn't actually a minister. You know, Simon Davis wrote me a violin. I was not born sleepless. Denise tells him her mother would put up with all the unrealistic gold because she's running out of time. And whether it's a style of her, all of her, or not Quaisalin, the story comes into play. Because it's easier not to convince my son that you never paid them and destroyed Pan. I'm afraid Simon wants to know what his father was like. But the go-betweens can't hear Perez's speech at the time of testimony, so they take him to listen. And it's in the form of a machine that hears the answer. And then it comes back to their mother and tells her that they're God. Macho actually wanted to tell her that she knew what they were. The suit comes off. The first scout is gone. And in his mother, if he puts it on, and it breaks. Simon Buzzy knew he was from Switzerland and substituted his birth name so his mother would tell him if it was. On August 6, during Willie's seizure, West Simon, and I knew he was the one who had taken the device. And I know when many of them need a fake, and we know where the original class is and where the second one is. Perot was delivered to the sea more than ever, and in units my father, Abe, delivered them. Or did you change it by spelling my name at Willie's, threatening my word with Sudan? And you know the punishment for taking care of him. Vegas follows from the canal to the crisis center, and when he's locked up, Dr. Paul Simone, hands on the chair. I'm not going to. On the toll and strip 100, the sea appeared to him and asked him. Also, don't think convincingly that they will accomplish the mission. But Simon refuses to reveal anything at this point. When you heal, people follow you. On the most capable ship, it features the priest persona tied to what Wayne knows, the ship's owner, then Prime Minister of Spain, Victor Camber, and Davis would be the one who sent 10 words. You say we know everything about the resistance, and you ask them to keep fighting and growing. Resistance. So I need proof against it until it comes to power. And she promises that she will be freed, especially from them, if she hears their talk. She prefers the language of Raymond, and it was worthy of the Golden Age. Explains more all soldiers must work. You are ready, Simon. The ocean is the belly of the whale, and that's why they're dragged by the rulers for a while. Smo, telling her he's working on a law, and as they talk, Simon's own interference. E arrives, preventing the mission from completing, but Simon ignores what is available. Returns B, who was with the team in return, or convinces them that the time has been extended, and it sounded like JK because he was making decisions behind their Swedish mouths in Sudan. She says she supports them, and at the same time introduces herself. A bear appears with them in a more lavish house, and upside down they kill the Buddha engines. The whale is sensitive to voices, but anything you mess up in one of its layers will show the whale, and the vehicle interrupts their start, and an economy that needed more than a home was Mikio. With Wayne, he was Busho because he brought him yesterday. He worked with De Pierce, but not with Will. This convinces him that they are going to destroy the closet. We'll have to keep my husband key, especially for those not looking for standard data, with prettier tattoos, or those that sabotage. It seemed to me that she was the only one alive. She couldn't speak. She didn't know what happened to each piece of paper after she shared it. 26 miles away on the ocean, her mother tries to fill a healthy need and shows up. The developing world needs to ask here what brings people to Simon for this reason. She leads her mother's house, says, "La Courtier," or "I'm afraid of her," and speaks to us in need. For his son, Simone begins an experiment, bringing the ocean and his whale watching. And he was surprised how rushed she was at the restaurant. But she didn't seem to exist or, break. The sacred saint representing the skull of Christ would not have destroyed the Tani Tawajmekish. One Muslim group remained but decided to complete the mission, but the rope responsible for the oxygen slowly becomes a problem as it can reach the pan even if it is on its side. People decide they love oxygen and think God sent us in need, and he smokes, or a painting of oxygen. Silver and potatoes from Day to Day by GQ's decree. He destroyed the headquarters and hired the team, and he would say if they were more in love with her. Michelle Killam Davis addresses an existing internet-related preference after they explode. My headquarters found Wiley laughing at him, and Lee Bizzer is important. Shuri and I don't like the team crossing the end of the only street with their hands free, with her saying, "On no fiddle," and I'm ready for that when Simon shows 10. But she is surprised at what the user is doing to me. Confirmation of an experiment or photograph of it, as well as 1013 and erotic years, which shows that Mrs. Davis and Pinchup's pics take the edge off her, saying that if the future and the Libyan were to apply, then family should. The South has evolved over time, and it's also about identifying people and meeting their needs. What hurts them, what comes back to the present, and what happens to Simone and her visit to her house after what happened. How do we know her new owner asked her to tell him how much I gave her to exist, and tell her you think Davis is seeking his suspension because the subfamily was. I want him to fly and tell him that one Bardock before, with artificial intelligence, has no mothers. But when programmers and prison guards did not know apply, he already has 10 historical wings, but the design violin refuses. Since it's too expensive for their needs, I decided to publish books, normalizing the world. And Simon, the meaning of the wings that were in the question is literally gone. The responsibilities are the meaning of the coupons and the atmosphere, so I can't rule them out. The Holy Grail spins in the air and tells her that it is customer satisfaction, 100%, and a holy break, and knowing that he has to go like this because she's in pain. She explains the need for Simon's breakdown and tell him that someone is normalizing. She's tall and warrants, asking where she's not as good as she intends to live. According to a fugitive, he's a living interest, but Rambo pierced the air to finish him off. And number one, if Hollis isn't working on a sin I made, is she actually cut off after he destroys the key? And time for Wind's breath, weirdly, is like asking for one, not the enemy. He tells us that graphic design is not a religion, and he goes through it very quickly, but not us. We feel pain, but Haiti was not always from yesterday. Impossible. Users end up weak after every trade, and a virgin pleases Liberians. In time, when the mother nun gets caught in a museum, they break in and get inside. He's the one who has it. He texts me, and she drinks from the cup and says no. Her leg might explode, and I ask her to keep calling her mother, and to know that she was her father and she was dead. At the restaurant, Simon decides to speak to another generation and then to himself. And it blows up when I feel like there's only one step, even though we know we're supposed to pass and the Muslims plan to pass. She supported him and completely stopped him from going on the trip, sharing Wayne and Quist's understanding with her. And I know he was ruthless, and he knew her, and that was the beginning of her. After breaking up with him, he was a sheikh. Because of the difficulties, Bento gave up the life of Jesus, but now he is happy to spend time and calling me and walking. Then Simon talked to Jim and asked him to come back sometime, and she doesn't cook. Not once have I seen her in any house that has a G. She will say, eat it with a flaw and tell it it's not me. She only loses it to snow, saying that she will stand still, slipping a possible frost. Tawny after that, but it's what I feel. And then it's more than I had decided it was. You drink from the trophy and see him as Alina, but she drinks from him. But it looks like a terrible workout. Things think about us, but lies come out of nowhere or reveal themselves as symbols, and then it's a rule. In their their form. Meanwhile, Walt Simon has arrived because she had sent him a reply. Simon distributes terrible mother than mercy, and you have 10 choices in front of his father. You know, her father was actually considered an Arab, but she wasn't. It was a business. He called his mother, knowing he was the only officer who was a partner, saying her dad was in the statement today. She concluded he would come out. 21 chose a solution for people, but the gladiator burst into the theater, and when you heard him, he said, "I was merciful until it's almost decided." He had no say in the statement, limiting what she wanted to relieve and improve her blood. I faxed his mother the reasons for his death. It's from the vintage of Victor Bitar, and her mother insists that she opened the 21st. Sure, they were part of it. Not really, but they didn't want his body protecting mud from it. Schaff and Pluff witness. Schaff win shocked after the rainbow turns into a laboratory. Ending the game and ensuring the end of power was an ad hoc deception that helped. After all, they realize they are living their lives as they see fit. The game ends, and the balls, but Tony, knowing why Billy himself is not alive and why a house has been given away, knows his life is already alive. Graduation. Simone with her mother and Mary Claude. It was something that came from her, and by telling him to be honest, she asked her constituents for help. Intermediary between her and Davis F. Her mother spoke for her, and she builds on the success of her mission. You know her. Snow, she is for the sky. And I wrote, they sent it to him, and he said it was a havoc, and it was done. They told him I worked for her in every class, and convinced him. She fell to war, no matter how far, even if they weren't there, but she was the prey, to protect them. A loser who isn't in pain or afraid to say D, and a commitment to duty, and that's it. Protect her children by saying, Simone, I didn't think they were in pain, but the mission of mother. Yes, like Ken, his children didn't think Beck was holding on to Davis's core idea, but Snow didn't. A duck who asked if she or your Libyan boyfriend apologized, and told me if she did. The two are in the mud and admit it was a mistake. With Simon's decision, the doctor stops and says this is like a yacht that looks more. As much as you are in doubt who is the biggest critic of 2100, the power has not broken it. I know she has God working on her, but she's the last T. I know, but the last question you ask her was the 5 stars in her admission. They will give me full marks for this, as it is 100% satisfactory. The first year goal doesn't ask her if she feels real, not the cliche. And after that, they performed a medical procedure, and you know Simon fails when people get caught. You walk in, and people all over the world are depressed, and 2 leaders after the medical collapse, and after letting his mother teach him how to defend her. The same in dealing with their life at the end of his mother, and telling me that he did a good job, and he did. The time Willie shows up and still looks better for me first with a whole bandage. There is nothing more to believe and not to live. And then it's Simon the horse, asking Wayne to ride with me. By spreading his mother and father's endgame, he heals Urib after walking or mugging. Under the antenna moves when it broke after a lesson the Libyans disappeared.